Welcome to the Hunting Beast Report, a live video podcast with Dan Infalt and host Jeremy Gillespie.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Stealth Outdoors. The off-season's a great time to rehab your gear, so head on over to Stealth Outdoors at www.stealthoutdoors.com to pick up some climbing stick wraps, cam buckle covers, platform cable wraps, or stealth strip rolls for all of your miscellaneous silencing needs. Today's show is also made possible by Hunting Beast Gear, innovators in mobile hunting gear and the designers of the Beast Sticks and Beast Stand. Check out the latest products at www.huntingbeastgear.com. And now, on to the podcast. All right, Dan, we're live. Part two. Had some technical difficulties there. Hopefully those have been resolved. Getting some comments that says so far so good in the chat. So apologize to everyone for that. Last week we had some buffering issues, so my connection is not the greatest. I tried to change some settings to make it better, and apparently that didn't help, so I changed them again, and we'll see how this goes. So far so good. Anyways, before we did that, we were thanking Uncle Lou and Mario for helping put on the show, talking about Beast Gear's new plaid jackets and Easter. So that's where we got distracted. So let's pick it up with Dan. How was your Easter?
Easter was good. I went over by my daughter's place. My kids, my grandkids, everybody was there. It was a good time. Ate a lot of food. Kind of interesting driving back from Easter. She lives in Janesville, so it was drive through Janesville to get back to the house. And I was kind of surprised to see, Burger King, McDonald's, all the gas stations, all the restaurants, the Mexican restaurant out there, everything open, and not only open, but packed on Easter evening. I remember when I was a kid, there was nothing open on Sundays, more or less Easter, just kind of crazy.
Yep, times have changed, that's for sure. My Easter was not, I'm coughing right now, that's a good segue into, my Easter was not great. I'm 99% sure I got COVID again, and Sunday I spent the day shivering all day got the body aches and the chills and all that stuff, but I think I'm on the mend now, so hopefully a couple more days will be back to normal. So if I go into a coughing fit or lose my voice here tonight, I apologize.
You got COVID? What are you, a liberal?
Yeah, I've been real lucky with that. I've got it. I think this is the fourth time now. I got it right away in March 2020, and then 2 times since then. It's been almost 2 years since I had it. So I guess I was due.
I got it twice. Carol's still feeling the effects from the first round. She got it really bad. Ended up in the hospital with blood clots and stuff, and literally came pretty close to having some major problems because as I took her to the hospital, one of the blood clots broke loose. So we got her there like perfect timing. Yeah.
Yep. It's still hanging around, unfortunately. So I'd like to thank Wuhan for that, I guess. So a couple announcements real quick. We're going to do a news article or two, and then we're going to get back into the questions. First, just a general public announcement. If anybody's interested in buying a license or buying points for Colorado, it's April 2nd. Today is your last day to do it. I can't remember. It's either 8 o'clock or 10 o'clock Colorado time. So if you forgot to do that and you're trying to go to Colorado, that's a good one. And then, Dan, let's talk about, you sent me an article about the governor of Wisconsin doing some things that had been passed by the state legislature, and then he ended up vetoing them. So let me pull that article up real quick. Yeah, so the title is, the article is Rep. Sappick Evers. How do you say that? Evers or Evers?
Nevers
vetoes whitetail population rejuvenation bill and wolf population goal bill. So the moral of the story in the article, if people want, they can check it out. But it is, well, Dan, why don't you explain it, what they're going to do in the Northwoods there for the does?
It was a bad April Fool's joke because that came out on April 1st. But there's something behind that. He has a long history of doing these things like right after a holiday or on times when people are busy and will miss it. So what he did was we were all excited because our legislators put a bill in to stop these doe hunts in northern Wisconsin, where the population is so low in some of these areas that, I mean, the deer are really getting scarce. I mean, we're losing hunters like crazy up in those areas. And he wants these doe hunts to keep going on and keep dropping the population. And he stopped our bill. He vetoed it, so that and it's not like we were stopping kids. There was a clause in the bill to allow they still have the youth hunt. The youth could shoot does, which I didn't like. I would rather they didn't have that, but he vetoed it anyways. And that wasn't the only bill he vetoed. He also vetoed a wolf management plan, because the wolves are getting out of hand. And that bill had wanted there to be a number put on how many wolves the state could handle. And he didn't like that either. He vetoed that because wolves are cute and cuddly, I guess.
Yeah, so not great news for Wisconsin sportsmen, unfortunately. And I think just like northern Michigan, northern Wisconsin could use a break for the deer also to help them rejuvenate, and less wolves would probably do both populations a favor also.
People got to remember that stuff when they're voting.
Yeah. And then, Dan, you sent me a picture. This was exciting. You won't be able to see it, but the viewers will. I'm going to pull it up. You sent me a picture of a bear in a local neighborhood. So I'm going to pop that up right now. Why don't you explain what's going on there?
Well, that picture is from Leslie's doorbell cam. Leslie lives in Sullivan, just on the street from me. She used to own pickets. That bear came to visit her yard on Friday night. What's interesting is everybody talks about this bear that's running around over here, but while that bear was visiting her house or whatever, the next day I went over and did some scouting and ran into Kurt, the guy who has our building in Sullivan, where we do our meals and our workshops and stuff. And he asked me to come over by his house and scout with his son a little bit, and I did. And when I got over there, he showed me where in his yard a bear was Friday night, eating out of his bird feeder, and there's giant tracks there. And he said it came back 3 times. It was there all evening. At one point, they scared it away on accident, and it came back. I mean, he doesn't want to scare it away. He likes the bear just like I do. But it had pretty big tracks. I mean, the tracks were pretty big to be just like a 150 pounder or something. They looked pretty good size. But he said it was there in the time frame when he saw it out the window is this about the same time as Leslie had the bear on her doorbell cam, like 6-7 miles away. So I'm pretty convinced it's not the same bear, which I think is pretty interesting.
Relatively uncommon for you to have bears in the area, correct?
It is supposed to be. But the last about 7 or 8 years, there's been bears here every summer. Doesn't seem like many people see them during hunting season, but all summer when they're active and into like September, there a lot of people seeing bears around here in the last half dozen years.
That's kind of happened in my area when I was in Michigan. I was in the east side, about, I don't know, halfway north to south, Aranet County, if anyone's from Michigan. And there had been a few bears around, but it seemed like they were getting more common the last 5 to 10 years. So they're migrating south again, it seems like.
Yeah, we had one in my yard last year, and I'm 10 miles from Kurt's place. We had it in my yard. My son took pictures of it across the street from our house, and a neighbor took pictures a different day of it walking across the road a block down from our house. So they're moving this way. I mean, the population is definitely rising. It's hard to get a bear tag in most areas in Wisconsin, so the population keeps going up. The population keeps expanding, and I kind of like it that way. I think this area could handle some bears. I think we have plenty of room in these big swamps and stuff.
Yeah, kind of need to have a few around.
Yeah. Trouble is you know, people around here that aren't used to bears, non-hunters and stuff, are scared silly. I mean, if they haven't been around them, all they know is what Disney tells them, and and these shows about bears attacking people and stuff. When really they're pretty docile animals. They're like big raccoons. Worst they do is get in your garbage or into your chickens.
Yeah.
But
My personal experience, which hasn't been a ton, but every time I've seen a black bear in the woods, they're real spooky, and they as soon as they smell you, they take off running, just kind of like a coyote.
Yep.
Well, speaking of swamps too, I'm gonna post up another picture here, and this is a picture of a picture, so it's not super high quality. So guys, bear with us on there.
Let's talk about that first.
Yeah, well, go ahead before I put the picture up.
So I put a video up that was given to me by Jonathan Ott, a Beast member. Every now and then Beast members will send me a video, and if I like it, I'll put it on a channel or whatever. And what he told me, and what's in the video on the Beast page, is that he was out hunting and he shoots his 10-pointer, and it was chasing a doe. It was rut time, and he had been hunting it. He knew where it kind of was, and the 10-pointer and another buck, like a 2.5-year-old 8-pointer, were chasing this doe all over the woods. When they finally gave him a shot, he took it, and the smaller buck just kept chasing the doe. So he went over and got his neighbor, and they went over to fetch this buck. And when they fetched it, he heard something along the river, looked over, the doe's laying there hiding, still in the area. And here comes that little buck looking for her, on her tail, gets on her and jumps on her and starts moaning her. And then she jumps in the river to get away. And then he starts recording with his phone, and they come right past him in the river within a few yards. And he filmed it, and it was pretty cool footage. So I made a video out of it. And what's interesting is I haven't heard anybody say it, not him or anybody else. But while I was watching that video, I'm pretty, I don't know how to say it, but I'm pretty observant. I'm always looking for things in videos. I got this weird mind, the way it works. And I noticed right away that that doe's head was flat. And does don't have flat heads. Bucks do. Does have round domes. They don't have that squared off head. So I slowed the video down, and when the buck chases that doe by and you look close, you can real clearly in the video. It's hard to get a still frame out of, but if you watch the video, especially in slow-mo, you can see buttons on it about this big.
Yeah.
So that buck is probably, celebrating Joe Biden's transgender day or whatever it was today, because he was doing something with another buck.
Yeah. So I
No
pulled
wonder he went for his life in the river, right?
I pulled the picture up you sent me, and I did watch the video too. And after you told me that, I went back and watched it again. And it's hard to say for sure, but there's one or two frames if you watch it in real time and watch it a few times. Certainly does look like that there's buttons on that deer. Yeah. Certainly does look like it. So kind of a real interesting observation. Maybe he was just that fired up he was chasing anything in the neighborhood. And then Dan, you also put out another video recently called the Swamp Hunter's Bible. Why don't you give me the 2-minute recap of that video and what you're trying to do there?
Oh, that was a really good video, because I took the best parts of the workshop, and the section of swamp we did is a section where I've killed a lot of big bucks and had a lot of encounters, and I edited in all the hunts and stuff as I talked about them, and really went into detail. I mean, the stuff that we talk about in that video is pretty cool, and it's a must-see video for people that like to learn about tactics. It's a long one, though. It's like,
yeah, I was going to say like an hour and a half, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty long.
Yeah. So if people haven't checked that out, there's a lot of good information in there, and that's in a lot of ways, it's kind of like one of your DVDs for free.
It is. But some of that stuff this time of the year with Easter and stuff gets buried in there. People miss it, so it's good to mention that on here. Hopefully, more people catch it.
Yeah, that was a good one. So if you haven't watched it, check it out. So Dan, we titled this episode Q&A Part 2. So last week, again, we had buffering issues. It seems like that's solved. Everyone, I don't see any more chat comments about that the buffering's going on. So hopefully that's fixed. But because of that, we missed some questions last time. So we're gonna definitely answer questions from this chat, but we had a couple of good ones that we weren't able to get to last time. So we'll start out with those. Last episode, Devin asked Dan and Jeremy both quick story of how or who you first got into hunting and when you realized you were hooked for life.
Why don't you go first?
Sure. This is the easy one for me. So my stepdad, I was probably 8 years old, I guess, and took me out on a rifle hunt. It was just, he wasn't a super serious hunter, just your average weekend Michigan sportsman's guy, and took me out. We walked out, you know, right at gray light, basically sat down by an apple tree in a corner of a picked cornfield. And knowing what I know now, it makes a lot of sense. There was a kind of a grassy spot in an inside corner. He was looking into the field. I was sitting looking the other way into this grassy spot, which was an inside corner. And it was a cold morning in November. A buck came out and I could see his breath breathing. I could hear him walking, and my stepdad could hear him too, but he thought he was coming out of the woods, like in his direction. And I didn't know what to do. I was 8 years old and I'd never even seen a deer, I don't think, that close in real life. So this deer's like 40 yards away and it's getting closer and closer and closer. And I'm waiting for him to shoot. I don't want to move. You know, he said, "Oh, make sure you sit still." So I'm not moving. I don't say a word. Long story short, this deer gets like 5 yards away from us. He still doesn't know where it's coming from, or he decided he couldn't move. And then the deer looked at me, kind of did the stomp thing and snorted and took off. And, you know, that was the coolest thing I had ever seen in my life at that point. So that's what got me hooked.
Yeah, that's a cool story. So me, I mean, I was a hunter before I was born. It was in my DNA. I can't remember any time when I didn't have a passion to be in the wilds. I was a kid that never fit in school or with, you know, buddies and stuff. I always was the odd one. You know, I just wanted to be in the woods. I wanted to be fishing and hunting and chasing things and catching critters. And I'd be out all night trying to catch things and chase down possums and coons when I was just a boy. Yeah, it was just all day and night. I mean, I grew up in a great era, you know, for a kid like that, because there was no cell phones, no, you know, our phone was on the wall next to dad, so you couldn't talk to girlfriends or anything without him listening, or your mom listening. So you didn't really do phone calls. You didn't, you know, I lived in the country. So you just ran out and you found stuff to do, and you know, you hung out in the woods and stuff. And it was always a passion of mine. I mean, way more than my brothers, sisters, friends. I mean, in those times, just about everybody hunted and stuff. But for me, it was like, it's always been a way of life, not just, you know, it's not a hobby. It's who I am. I'm a hunter. It's always been in my DNA. I can't remember a time when that wasn't my passion, when it wasn't, you know, chasing critters, hunting critters, doing something in the outdoors or dreaming of it, you know?
Yeah, I can relate. I grew up living along a river, Rifle River. If anyone's from Michigan or familiar, it's a real popular place to go canoeing and tubing in the summer. But my grandparents had a place there, and I spent a lot of time there doing fishing and chasing turkeys and all sorts of stuff. So, yeah, I think when you grow up around it, it's easy to fall into it for sure.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, if your father's a hunter, if your brother's a hunter, if your uncle's a hunter, you end up, you have a bigger chance of hunting. I didn't really have that. My brothers that hunted went off to Vietnam before I was even old enough to know what was going on. And the ones that came back didn't really want to hunt. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they didn't even want to be around guns after what had happened there. And my dad, he was never a big hunter. He obviously wasn't against it. He shot, I think, 2 deer in his life or 1 deer in his life. And that was about it. His way of getting by for us was to have 2 jobs, to have a big garden. He liked to fish and to gather. So he'd teach me how to find wild mushrooms and nuts and berries and stuff and plants that were edible. And we'd make wines and stuff like that. But, you know, for hunting wise, I didn't have mentors. I didn't have people to show me how or to do it. It was just a natural passion. I just went out and chased them. I can remember when I was a little kid, like 9 years old, my dad had this bow, a recurve bow that was 90 pounds. And I would shoot that thing, and I would hunt game with it and kill game with it. I could not pull it all the way back.
Right. Yeah.
But I could go back far enough to fling an arrow out of it and I'd kill stuff. And I wish I still had that bow. I don't know what happened to it. But yeah, I mean, it's a little different because I think a lot of kids nowadays, if they don't grow up with a hunting mentor, they just don't grow up hunting. You know, but it was different times. I mean, we weren't as controlled as the kids nowadays.
Right.
I mean, if you went running around in the back with a 22 or something, your neighbors didn't care. You know, if you're 9 years old and you're running around in the backyard with a 22, they'd say, "Oh, that's a good kid." You know, now they'd be calling 911. We have an active shooter. You know,
Yeah.
It's a whole different world. So we can't really have that nowadays. That kind of raising, that's gone, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, sad but true. Dan, we had a couple other questions. Zeke Outdoors last time said, "Did you mount the first monster you shot, and what is the first buck you mounted?"
So I shot a lot of nice bucks that I probably would consider mounting now that I didn't back in the day. But the first monster I shot, I did mount, and that would have been in 1989. That was that buck with the
big brow tines, right?
Big brow tines, yeah.
Yeah, talked about that a little bit on the last episode.
Yeah, that was that one got mounted, and that was the first one I ever mounted.
So for me, I mounted. Actually, it's not a big deer. I think it's behind me. Let's see here if I can see it in the camera. Yeah, the one over my right shoulder in the video. Not a big buck at all. 100-incher. But for me, at the time, I shot 3 deer that year. And one of my goals that year was to shoot 2.5-year-old or older bucks in Michigan with a bow, which I hadn't done to that point. And that was one of those bucks. And then later that year, I shot my first Pope and Young buck on an out-of-state hunt in Ohio. So mounted both of those deer, and those were the first 2 that I mounted.
I've got some bucks on my wall that aren't even 100 inches. You know, I got one that's a 2.5-year-old. It's got a 4-point rack on this side, and this side's got a velvet antler that curves around its face. I just love that buck. I love freaks, you know. So I mean, I think if you want to mount it, you mount it, and don't worry about what people think. 100 inches is a nice buck for most people.
Yep, I was excited. That was the first time, like I said, I tagged out before the gun season on 2 decent bucks. And for the area that I was hunting, if you shot 2-year-old bucks on any year, you were doing all right. So I was perfectly content with that, and still am. So Z-Tac Outdoors, if you're scouting and finding deer bedding or buck bedding, were those deer scared off before you got in there, or where do they go? Because when is it the best time to hunt those beds then? Basically, you're out scouting, spring, whatever, you find deer, and they're not in the bed, right? Did they hear you, or are they bedding somewhere else right now, I think is the question.
Well, that's a tough question, but here's the gist of it. Most of the time when we're scouting in spring, we're scouting in beds where those bucks aren't there right now. They're moved someplace else. In some places, in some areas, they are bedding there, or some deer are bedding there. But usually big bucks are wintering in a different area than where they are in the fall. And what we're actually looking at is the beds from last fall. But in some of the spots I go to, I mean, the best bedding's the best bedding no matter what, because of the way the land lays out, and you are kicking deer out of there now. But you're kicking them out now. We're not going and looking at those beds in September or August. Hopefully not even July. I mean, we're leaving those deer alone for quite a while and staying away from those areas. But most of the time, like around the swamps and stuff, I mean, we're scouting these bedrooms. Those deer are they're wintering out by crops. They're not down in those swamps. The swamps are kind of, you know, knocked down. They're open. They'd be laying out in the sun. The green growth hasn't grown in. And we're looking at the beds from fall. But if you get into hill country, you're on the best points and fingers and stuff, or you're in the right wood lot, or even a swamp where that's all they've got, You can be kicking the deer out now in some places. But that, there's no place where hunters don't get, or I shouldn't say hunters, where people don't get. I mean, you got shed hunters and everything else. I mean, people walk everywhere. Coyotes walk everywhere. And I don't think a deer so much differentiates coyotes and people or wolves and people. It's more danger. They understand danger. So what they're doing is they're finding areas where they don't have an influence of danger, but there is no place where they don't occasionally have danger. So as long as you get in, get your intel, get out, and you stay away from it in hunting season, I think you're okay.
A lot of good advice there. Dan, Tim Kasuba. Tim, if I pronounced your last name wrong, apologize. Dan, is there going to be any more large group public land challenges?
I'm still going to have some challenges and stuff. We didn't really get that done last year. I wanted to do one in late season, and some stuff came up. I was going to go on a lion hunt, and it kept getting put off, and it just ended up that I never ended up getting it done. But we'll do some more of those. I don't think the hunting public has interest in doing that anymore. I mean, I wish they would, but that's not up to me.
Sure. Well, hopefully that comes about. And Dan, you organized what you were calling like Battle of the Bows, right? So I think people are excited to see that again, even if it's the beast crew.
Yeah, we got to make a plan. I don't have a plan for this year, but I do want to continue to do those. And when I do those, I do want to invite people from the channel, people that come to the show and are involved in this show.
That's
not a
cool
huge
idea.
number of those people, but I do want to bring people from the audience when I do that. I just love the idea of bringing people that aren't exposed to that hunting, the filming and stuff like that, and letting them have a fun, week with us.
Yeah.
So I'll bring that up when that comes up, when we, we'll probably do something like either have you send emails or apply some way that you want to go. And the hard part is that there's always so many good applicants, and you want to take everybody, but you can only take like one. But we will be doing something like that. We'll do more of that.
Yeah, that'd be very cool, for sure. And those videos always seem to be real popular. So if you could get a couple people from the channel or from the audience involved too, I think that'd go over real well. Yeah,
last time we took Savannah outdoors. I haven't seen her on for a while, but I did get a message from her not too long ago. She's still doing good. But we took her the last time up into the hill country Battle of the Bows, and that was a blast. It was a hoot having her along.
Dan Hunt Better says, I loved your top 12 bow kills video. Can you talk about bedding scrapes a little more, mainly how to identify them and not get them mixed up with other scrapes?
Yeah, that's a very good topic. So bed scrapes are something that I discovered a while back, and I always felt it was like an advanced thing from what people call primary scrape. I think most people would confuse it with a primary scrape. But what I would call a bed scrape now is you get buck bedding areas. You can either call it 2 buck bedding areas, or you can call it a spread out one. But you'll be able to, an area that can hold multiple bucks. One's bedding in one spot, one's bedding in another. And the staging area is about the same distance from each, and the trail comes out of each bedding area and meets there. And there's a scrape there. It's usually in very close proximity to the bedding area. It's like 100 yards or so, or 75 yards. And it's usually a scrape that is used year round, not just in, late October or November. So what you get is, if you have 2 competing bucks that are of an older age class, they will, as they come out of these bedding areas, they will work to scrape. I think they're kind of setting the other one, they're talking to each other in a way like, hey, this is my area. The first time I ever seen anything like that was, which one was it? there's two bucks that stand out. I think it would have been the 400-pound slop buck. That buck, I was watching from the road, and it would come out, in late September, early October, whatever, that early season time frame, and work a scrape. And there was another 10-pointer with it that was probably in the 140s. It was also a mature deer, but smaller racked. And they would come out each day separately and work to scrape and move on. And then finally I moved in and I killed them. I was watching them from the parking lot. And then I had another one. And you got to remember now, that's one of my best bow kills, right? Then another one, a huge 11-pointer I got that has like a 24-inch inside spread. It's a giant. That buck, I found that buck, I want to say it was early August, late July, something like that. I went way back into this wilderness where there wasn't as many big bucks back in those days. And when you heard about when you go after it, and I had a friend who had some trail cam pictures of a big buck back there, but didn't have the rack, but had pieces of it. He had like the deer was too close to the camera or something, but you could just tell it was a monster. And I went back looking for this thing and way back into this wilderness area and up on this wooded ridge, looking down into this river bottom in July or August. I think it was early August. And I saw this buck down there, and it was a monster, and it was living in an oxbow coming out. And I actually got some film of it in July. And then I came back and watched it a couple of times, and it kept coming out of that same bed in there. And again, there was another buck coming out of that oxbow in a different section. And they were meeting at a scrape and working that scrape. And I shot that thing on opening day. It was raining all morning. And when it stopped at like noon or so, I shot it at 1 p.m. when it came out to freshen that scrape. And that was in early September. I mean, when do you shoot deer off of scrapes in
That's got to be a rare one. Yeah.
But I've had interactions with very big bucks on probably 4 or 5 occasions on scrapes in September. But those scrapes, that's always the situation, is right up against those bedding areas, and there's 2 bucks compete. It's not a breeding scrape. It has nothing to do with does. Their ways of communication are to scrape the ground or rub a tree.
Right.
It's not always about does, and even people with a lot of expertise kind of, in my opinion, read that stuff wrong a lot. To my opinion, those scrapes are all about letting other bucks know what's going on.
You think that's anything to do with like when you see early season sparring, right? That's not aggressive fighting. Do you think that's anything to do with setting the pecking order, that same style?
Yeah, kind of. It's mild. I mean, they're not fighting or anything.
Right.
But they're marking that, and they're not, they're coming out, they're working that, and then they're moving their own separate ways. I haven't seen bachelor groups do it. But it's at a time frame when they're bachelor grouping. I mean, that one buck, that big 11-pointer still had some velvet on it when I shot it. But they're marking that scrape and they're working that scrape at a time frame, when they are in bachelor groups, but I've never seen bachelor groups do it. I've seen the bucks come out and they don't hang together at all. They're like rivals. So that's what I believe. Obviously I'm not the deer, but from my observations, that's what I believe, is that they're rivals and they're competing against each other.
Well, a couple of the cases you mentioned, you said they're both mature bucks, so that lend a lot of support to that theory.
What you're going to notice is those scrapes are not giant, hood-sized scrapes either. They're small scrapes. If they're low in river bottoms, like the one with the velvet buck, that was easy to see. It was a work scrape because it was in, relatively low ground, so you could see the scraping real easy. But in some of the areas where it's harder ground, they're harder to see. You got to find that licking branch, see the ground pod. It isn't like, a rut scrape where it's the size of a hood, and they're, but they come in there, they pee in it, they scrape it, they work the licking branch, and they move on.
Yeah, it seems like all the early season signs a lot more subtle than the stuff you're finding during the pre-rut and the rut.
Correct.
Uno Dos Trace says, is it possible for bucks to grow big in a bad CWD zone?
Yeah. Why wouldn't it be?
I don't know. Maybe the assumption is they're all dying in CWD. But Dan, you've got a unique experience being from Wisconsin. And Wisconsin, when they had the Ernebuck thing, I think that was some of the better deer hunting. So maybe talk about Ernebuck or bonus buck or whatever was going on, and because that was during the CWD peak hysteria era, I believe.
Yeah, well, I don't think CWD kills most of those deer. They still get to 4, 5, 6 years old. They can live a couple of years with CWD, and they usually don't get it till they're mature or they're getting older. So when you go back to the Ernebuck and stuff, what really sucked about Ernebuck was we had a high population of deer, and if you had skill, you could get on big bucks pretty regularly up in in this area until they did that Ernebuck thing. And when the Ernebuck thing came along, these guys killed so many does and stuff that the bucks were competing for those does very rapidly, and the ruts became very good, and guys killed a ton of big bucks. And then they thought that Ernebuck thing is the greatest thing in the world, and there's a whole bunch of people that want to bring it back. But what they don't realize is that's why we went so. After they shut down the Ernebuck, the population was so low. That's why we weren't seeing any bucks after that, is because they had knocked the population down. So that Ernebuck did its job, and its job was to bring the population down, and it was a bad thing. It was bad all the way around, in my opinion. I mean, we got the population way too low. The only way to combat CWD is to just treat it like everything else, is just manage for it. I mean, you can't kill it out of the population. It's going to always be there. There's nothing we can do about it. I believe it's probably in every population of deer across the country by now, because it'll travel through ticks. A tick can get the blood and fly on a bird to another area. You can have a vulture can eat the flesh that has CWD prions in it and fly into another state and take a crap, and where it craps will have CWD now, because CWD doesn't die through being digested.
Yeah,
it doesn't rot. It's a prion. It's there forever. Once it's created, it's there forever. So it gets into the soil, and you can't get rid of it. The only way they can get rid of it out of soil is to use like a bleach solution and bleach the soil. They've tried burning it, and it doesn't even go away from burning it. You can't get rid of it. It's everywhere. It's in deer urine. And then they take these deer farms and they take the urine and they sell it all the way across the country. If they have a CWD deer in that deer farm, that urine is going wherever they ship it, to whatever state, whatever country, whatever continent. It's already so widespread. There's no stopping it. But it doesn't kill all the deer. And last I heard, it was 24% of the population has a natural immunity to it. I don't want to say immunity. They're not immune. They have something in their DNA that makes it harder for that particular deer to get it. 24% of the deer.
Oh, like resistant but not immune.
Yeah, it's got some sort of resistance. And some of the keys that they're looking for fixing this is to figure out what that resistance is. But to kill all the deer doesn't help anything. I mean, that's not. I mean, it'd be the equivalent of COVID was killing some people, so maybe we should just wipe out most of the population and less people will get COVID.
You're right.
Killing everything doesn't solve the issue.
Yeah, like you said, genie's out of the bottle now.
Right.
Yeah. Dan, this was a question from last show. Hub Hanger said, Dan, what would you consider to be an average public land bow hunter harvest rate per season? And he's got in parentheses Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, for a 3.5 year or older buck. And I think the question is, what would be a good if you shot a 3.5 year old or older buck once a year, every 5 years, every 10 years? I think that's the question.
Consider yourself a good hunter, or
I think, yeah.
Well, I wouldn't quantify it like that. There's a huge difference between people. I mean, you just take me and Jeremy. I mean, I hunt what about 100 sits a year? What do you hunt?
If I'm lucky, 30 or 40.
Well, you're doing pretty good yourself.
Yeah, I get out quite a bit.
So you're doing half of what I do. So if I shoot one every 3 years and you shoot one every 3 years, actually you're doing a hell of a lot better than me. So I mean, you gotta kind of really not worry about what other people are doing or what you think is a good harvest rate or anything. I mean, there's times when I'll let a 3-year-old walk by, and there's times when I'll shoot a 2-year-old. There's times I'm holding out for a 7-year-old deer that I know that I'm just in love with, and you can't quantify that with a number of deer harvests or a number of deer heads on your wall. The only person who can say you're doing a good job is you personally. I mean, really, I think hunters nowadays care way too much what other people think and what justifies them as a great hunter. To me, I think you should really just have your own goals, your own reasons for hunting. Don't put so much pressure on yourself where you think you have to shoot a deer every 3 years or a deer every other year or a deer every year. I mean, in my heyday, I was shooting a big buck every year. Holding out for what I thought was the top specimen of my area and doing it every year. I can't hunt to that degree anymore. I mean, I was killing myself to do that and killing my family life and everything else, my jobs. Where now I'm killing less, being a little more selective, but I have a good family life. I have a good job. I enjoy my life a little more. So, I mean, really the balance thing is what's important. I mean, don't put yourself on some sort of, this is what people expect me to do, or this is what I have to do to be a great hunter. Just do what you do and just have fun. What's important is you have fun. You don't compromise your values and your morals. You stand up for what you believe in. And, if you don't feel like going hunting, don't go hunting because you get the pressure of you have to kill a deer every year. Just go out and have fun. It's hunting. That's what it's supposed to be.
Yep, that's a great message. And I'd shot a few pretty nice bucks before I moved to Montana. And the first year I was here, you only get one deer tag, mule deer or whitetail, not both in Montana. And the first year I was here, I don't know, a couple weeks into the season, I shot a 2-year-old mule deer because I'd never shot a mule deer with my bow, and it was off the ground, and I shot it from like 8 yards away. So it was a super fun hunt. A lot of people were like, "What'd you shoot that for?" And I was like, "Because it was fun." I don't know. And last year I passed up 10 deer, probably 130 inches, because for whatever reason, last year I was just looking for a big one. So because that's what I wanted to do.
Good way to look at it. Our friend, me and you, our friend Lou, from Stealth Outdoors, Uncle Lou. His motto is to just shoot every deer he sees till he's out of tags. He loves to eat them. He'll tell you straight out, I don't want to put all this work in. I don't want to put this effort in. And I'm just having a blast. I'm just wandering through the woods. He doesn't even put up a stand. He'll walk through the woods just shooting at deer. Yeah. And you know what? There's something to that I just love. There's something about that I love a lot more. I like listening to his stories more than I like listening to seasoned hunters' stories, just because it reminds me of my childhood, just going out there and trying to kill a deer. That innocence. I think your innocence kind of gets wrecked when you're holding out for giant bucks. It's kind of the opposite of what we should be doing. In nature, we'd be out there trying to get meat.
Yeah, for sure.
Now we're out there trying to get some giant rack and stuff, and I'm guilty as anybody else. But there's something special to me, within me, when a guy just wants to go out there and have fun and kill deer. And what I don't like, what turns me off, is the guys that tell you have to shoot this class of animal. It has to be 3.5 or older. And then you'll have other guys go, well, I only shoot them if they're 4 years old or older. So if a Boone and Crockett 3-year-old comes by, you're not shooting it? No, you're just going to say it was 4, right? Right. I just hate that fakeness. You know what I mean? That You know, like I'm better than you, and you should hold out there too, because the reason I can't kill one is because all you guys shooting the little bucks. You know, really, if it weren't for guys shooting little bucks, big bucks wouldn't be big bucks. You know, then you'd have to up your game more. You'd have to say, oh, you shoot 5-year-olds, I only shoot 10-year-olds. You know,
Right.
where do you draw the line? Because
Yeah.
the age, you know, shoot whatever you want. And, you know, you got to look at it too. Like if you hunt, let's say in South Central Iowa, I mean, my God, I mean, a kid could go out in his first year of hunting and shoot a Pope and Young, but try to shoot a Pope and Young in the public lands in Central Michigan. So where you live makes a huge difference. You can take a great hunter from Alabama, who's a way better hunter than me or you, Jeremy, and he'll never kill a buck like me or you out of Montana or Wisconsin.
Yeah.
But he might be a better hunter because he gets to shoot 4 deer a year, so he's always hunting. And you know what I'm saying? But his bucks are similar, you know?
Or Florida, there's 2 guys on the forum that come to mind, Eddie Gomez and PK Palmetto kid. Those guys are great hunters. And I mean, there's just not that many 120-inch deer running around Florida, if at all. So, but those guys kill a lot of great bucks for the area, and that's the important part.
Right.
Yeah. And do it consistently. So I think I got a lot of respect for both those guys. Are super good hunters. Dan, speaking of wetlands in Florida, Cheney Farm says, points on wetlands. Do deer prefer to exit beds towards dry land unless spooked? And points with bedding and trails leading to islands. Do you hunt the point first or go to the island and get it done? So maybe describe a few experiences you've had there.
Well, you know, most of the time, I would say that bucks get up on the dry land that's in the water, and then they head more towards dry land. But I've seen exceptions. I've been on islands and seen deer get up and go out towards the water where you know that they're going to walk a mile through cattails and water to get to food. I've seen it happen. But I would say the majority of the time, the food is up towards the dry land, and that's where they head. So not in the water.
Right.
It doesn't have to be like non-swamp, but it has to be dry, you know, because then you get the plant life, the green life that grows in there. What else was to that question?
Oh, let's see if I can get it back. Points on wetlands. So exit towards the dry land, and then it says points with bedding trails leading to islands. Do you hunt the point first or go to the island and get it done?
Yeah, that's the other part I was thinking about. So that depends. Now, if I think that deer is coming from that island, going through that point, I might hunt that point if I think I can't get to the island. If I believe he's on the island, I'm going to the island and I'm hunting that, if I can get away with it. If I believe he's on that point, I'm hunting the point. If I can hunt that point and not bother that island, like there's more than one travel route, I might do that. But for the most part, I'm going to follow what I believe to where that buck is and get as close as I can. Stage hunting in is not a good idea. And the reason is, it's a slap in the ass and you're telling them you're coming. It's like yelling through the woods, here I come, tomorrow I'm going to come hunt you. He knows you're coming. Those deer smell where you walk. It ain't like people. It's not like they have to see you. They smell where you've been. You go in there and you get on that point, if it's close to that island and you think you can hunt that island the next day 100 yards over, there's a good chance that deer crosses your scent trail and now he's onto you. And you'll still kill deer hunting like that. But that's what separates guys from killing giant bucks and killing average bucks. Giant bucks don't make many mistakes. If they sense you're around, they'll shut down, they'll get nocturnal, they'll stop moving. And therefore, most of your giant bucks will not be when you hang around an area and you hunt a couple spots. It'll be when you move in for the kill the first day. That's when you kill most of those big bucks. You got to catch them by surprise. And if you start slapping them on the ass and saying you're coming, the surprise is gone.
Yeah, makes it a lot tougher. And Dan, I want to add a question on for that, maybe to help with the answer. How much does the size of the island depend? Because we talk a lot about single trees or double trees out in the marsh where you got, only a dry spot to support one buck. But then you also talk about hunting islands that might be a couple acres. So how does the size of the island influence where you're going to set up?
Well, obviously you'd like an island to be, probably about an acre in size would be perfect. Especially, like just a central area that's real small that has some oaks and stuff, a tapering down point that has some bedding on it. You get it too small and you have a really hard time getting onto it to hunt.
Right.
And I've got islands like that where there's just giant bucks right off the sides of it, but you can't get in there without spooking them out of there. And I struggle with them all the time. You try to get it in the morning, they come in and they smell that you've gone in there. They come in early, they sense you're there. You get in there in the evening, you're kicking them out of there. It gets really difficult. But the preferred type of island to hunt is the one that is set up the best, has the bedding, and in this bedding 75 yards from where you're going to hunt them, and you can get to that hunting spot without spooking them. And you can hunt them in the evening. That's the preferred thing. When they bed under a lone tree out in the middle of a marsh, it's pretty hard to kill them. Then you're at this next area, the secondary area that you can hunt them. So basically what I do is you look at the beds, you find where he's bedding, and then you just go to the first tree you can hunt him out of, or the first spot you can hunt him. Sometimes it's not out of a tree, but you're going to go to, as soon as you're out of sight, sound, hearing, and smell, and you have a good setup, that's where your setup's going to be, as close as possible. Sometimes it's 75 yards, sometimes it's 350 yards. But that's the only way you're going to kill those bucks. I mean, you have to be as close as possible. 350 yards, it's pretty hard to get a mature 5-year-old deer in public land to move that far in daylight. But They occasionally do it, so it's worth a try. But the point is you got to be as close as possible. What I have noticed is that when a deer gets out of a bed and goes into, say, cattails or some thick crap like that, and he's going to move through it to get to a destination that, say, opens into woods and eventually maybe a field or, acorns or whatever. I've noticed that they will travel a lot longer distance when they're going through like a dead zone of like cattails or something in daylight. They'll move a little more specific. I mean, they're not going to go a freaking mile in daylight, obviously, but I mean, they might get 500 yards if it's solid cattails.
It's an interesting observation.
They might not too, but they do get further, in my opinion, when they go into that thick cover, especially if it never receives human pressure. And a lot of those cattails expanses don't. No,
that makes a lot of sense. Dan, our buddy, I believe it was Clark County, Sebastian Nicious, the forester, says, Dan, with April on our hands, are turkeys on the mind? And if so, have you done much hunting for big woods public birds?
Well, I haven't done much big woods turkey hunting. I've been in solid wooded areas around here, but not big woods. So I generally hunt turkeys around my house. I've traveled a little bit. I hunted them in Missouri. But I'm not big on turkeys. I mean, I'll go out and I'll hunt them. I got a opening week tag, I believe. I didn't even try and get a later season tag. I want to do some scouting. I want to get out and maybe find something else to hunt. But I'm not huge on turkeys, honestly.
Yeah, same. There's a lot of things to do in Montana in the spring. I know, Dan, you're not a huge shed hunter, but I like to shed hunt. So spend time shed hunting. Got a spring bear season so our turkey and bear opens in what is today? The 2nd, 13 days. So in 2 weeks, those open. And then, Dan, you won't be able to see this, but I'm going to put a picture up. I was going to talk about it and then we didn't.
Bear sounds a lot more fun.
Yeah. And then there's paddlefish. So I drew a paddlefish tag this year. So I got my picture up. Last time I had one was in 2021. And if people don't know about that, I've got a video or two on my channel, and Randy Newberg's got some good videos too about paddle fishing. That's kind of a cool thing. So I like to do that in the spring. And I don't know, I was never a huge bird hunter, so it's far down the list, but I did go a few times last year. And the only time, it was funny, the only time I got on birds 2 different times, there was no Tom with the group, and it was like peak turkey rut. So I don't know what was going on there. Had like 5 hens come by and no Tom. So let's see. Dan Oleg Chernenko, during the rut, how far downwind of the doe bedding do you set up to be in a range for cruising bucks?
Where the sign is.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I was thinking the same thing. Yeah, that's going to be highly dependent on what kind of bedding area, size of the bedding area, where the rubs are at, right? All that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, one thing I will add to that, though, is it's not always the downwind side. That's the common theme and the common theory, but I quite often see the cruising on the upwind side too.
Well, let me jump in real quick. That's more flatland than hill country, I'm assuming, right? Like swamps and stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But a lot of people will assume it's always on the downwind side, like to smell the does. But if the does are getting up and moving into, and I've seen this in hill country too, by the way, and going into food sources or something above them, I've seen the bucks go and cut those tracks or those trails and smell the trails rather than the actual deer. I've seen that quite often. That they, I've seen where they do both too. You got sign on both sides of the bedding area, and rather than just stay, well, they're going to be on the downwind side, I'll go where the trails come together on one end or the other and sit there, because I've seen them cruise the upwind side quite often too. I mean, obviously, it's more often, maybe 3 out of 4 times they're to the downwind side, but do not rule out the upwind side.
Yeah, there's hardly ever an always or never in deer hunting, right? It's pretty situational. Right. Devin asked Dan, have you ever felt like going for the highest age class deer brings more stress and anxiety with your overall hunt? And how do you deal with it if you're second guessing your setups?
You know, it used to, when I was younger, it used to bring in a lot of stress. Nowadays, I just go along for the ride and I'm just having fun. And, you know what, it's day by day, and I'm playing a chess game, and I don't feel that pressure to succeed. I'm actually kind of rooting for the buck, honestly. I mean, he comes in, he gives me a shot, I have to take him. That's the game, but I'm kind of rooting for him. And I really don't feel that stress anymore. I enjoy the chase, and to get rid of that stress, I think you have to get a few bucks under your belt where you feel comfortable about yourself and you don't feel like everybody's got their eyes on you and doesn't think you're adequate, which I think is a real thing, whether we want to admit it or not. Is that I think, especially in today's world, I mean, you go on the internet and it seems like, and I know it's not true, but it seems like everybody's shooting giant bucks, you know, and then they take pictures where, you know, 150-inch 3-year-old looks like a 190-incher, and you're thinking, holy crap, everybody's shooting 190-inchers, you know?
Yeah, right.
And really, I mean, just go out and have fun and don't put all that stress on yourself if you can help it. I think if you're really wanting to challenge yourself to get mature bucks and you're looking for the, you know, 5-year-old or older, which I am, I think what you should do is, if you're not killing one every year or every other year or every third year, is you might want to look at, you know, taking a 3-year-old or a 2-year-old. That's really nice too, you know, every here and there. And if you don't want to, that's fine too. I mean, but there's nothing wrong with that. You know, my thought is, for me, is that I'll take a pretty nice buck if I don't think all my leads are there. If it's getting to the point where you know, this is getting a little stressful because all these hunters and stuff, I can't really get on them. It's getting into rut now, and there's people everywhere. I might take a 2-year-old or 3-year-old, or if a 2-year-old's Pope Young, or, you know, or a 3-year-old that's, you know, 150 or something. I might take one of those if you know, I don't think I'm going to get a bigger buck. You know, why not? I'm out there to hunt. And there was a time when I stressed over stuff like that. I don't no more.
Yeah, I definitely did when I was getting started too. And like I said, I was trying to, I think a lot of it too is I was trying to prove to myself that I could do it. And going along with maybe shooting deer that you wouldn't have otherwise. A couple of years ago, for whatever reason, I decided that I was going to shoot. It had to be a top 3 deer for me. And that gave me some room, right? I didn't have to shoot the biggest deer. I could shoot something that'd be in the top 3. And I hadn't killed a bunch of big deer at the time. So that gave me room to improve, but still up the challenge every year. So I don't know, whatever.
You know, everybody wants to be somebody in hunting. You know,
right?
That was a common theme at the show that we did at the Dells when we did the deer show.
Yeah.
I kept having these young people come up to me and say, Dan, I really look up to you and stuff. I like what you're doing, and I want to do this. I want to be, you know, the guy. You know, what do I got to do? How do I get into this? How, you know, should I do a podcast? Should I do a YouTube show? What should I do? And it seems like everything's so flooded right now. I don't know where to go. And, you know, how can I do this and make a living? And the one kid that told me that, I mean, that you could just see the passion in his eyes. He told me how much he loved hunting and he wanted to do it for a living. And I told him, if you love hunting, don't do it as a job.
Right.
So, you want it to be fun. You know what? Hunt for you. You know, the best way you can keep hunting fun and enjoy hunting is be a machinist, be a welder, you know, drive a bus. You know, you get involved into, you know, if you want to be somebody in hunting, it kind of taints it. It takes away from the authenticness of the hunt. You know, it kind of puts pressure on you to be somebody you're not. I know these, you know, you see these young people, they come in, you know, like on the hunting beast. I mean, I've had young people come in, they hunt with me a few times, and you see this passion, you see them love their hunt and stuff. And you see them go out and make a channel and they become some person that their audience makes them into. You know what I mean? That you watch them and I see them on their videos and I'll be like, that's not the guy I know. That's not him. I know that guy. And that's not the way he talks. It's not the way he acts. You know, and if you kind of mildly confront him about it, be like, hey, dude, you said this and, you know, offline, this is you. And they're like, well, yeah, but if I say that, people will hate me. They'll do this. They'll say that. I'm like, just be authentic, man. They can't, because they'll lose following. They'll lose money. They won't get their YouTube money. They won't get their sponsor. And that just makes me sick. You know, if you want to be somebody in hunting, really think of that over. You probably would be better off just being quiet about your hunting, learning from other people, just going out and having fun, and make your money at something else. I mean, there isn't very much money in hunting to begin with. You know,
Yeah,
not unless you own a product or something. I mean, it's really not a lot of room in hunting for money unless you're one of the Drurys or, you know, the Lakoskis or, you know, it's not a lot of money in hunting.
Yeah, it's kind of like the NFL too. Such a small percentage of people make it to the point where it's profitable. It's like you're better off pretty much doing anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Hunt Better says, Dan, who are some of your favorite hunters that nobody knows about? That's a good question. I like that one.
There was a guy I grew up with, Todd Kuzmick. He was probably about 10 years older than me, Todd. He grew up about 10 miles from me, and he had a little farm, and it wasn't a great farm. It was just a little piece of property kind of surrounded by subdivisions and stuff, and they're building all around him, and he had just massive trespassing problems, not a lot of big deer, but he had some deer there. And Todd would come over by my place and hunt. I'd go over by his place and hunt. I met him because he was dating my sister for a while, and he used to kind of, you know, challenge me to do better and stuff. And we'd hunt against each other and stuff. And he'd shoot a good buck, I'd shoot a good buck. And that guy was really a good hunter. And he kind of was one of the people who kind of opened my eyes up to think outside the box, and, you know, would tell you, you know, like, you know, why are you doing it? Well, you know, that's what they say. You should do this or that, or, you know, and he'd be like, no, you know, you're listening to other people, listen to the animals, look at what they're doing, you know. And he kind of guided me that way. And those are the kind of people you remember. He was a great guy, and he would have went on to kill a lot of really big bucks, but there was an accident, and he got carbon monoxide poison, and he survived, but barely, and it's really changed his life and who he is. I did recently contact him, and he's still around, have a conversation with him, but he was one of the ones. Otherwise, who you don't hear about, probably everybody in my niche you kind of hear about, but one of them would be Dave. Dave wasn't really about being in the spotlight or anything. He was just one of those good old boys who liked the hunt, who loved the passion of it, and just he'd always be like, you know, that TV stuff and that show stuff, that's you. You know, I just want to have fun kind of thing. And that was great for me. It was actually, the thing with Dave was he was almost too nice to me, you know. Well, I wouldn't say almost. He was too nice to me. If we'd get on a deer, he'd always insist I go after it. He'd go to his own farm, see some big buck, call me up and tell me, you got to go get that. You got to go get him. And I'd be like, Dave, you go get him. And he'd be like,
Yeah.
no, Dan, you got to get that buck for the show. That's a big buck. You know, and he'd be rooting for me, and I'd feel bad. And, you know, looking back, I probably took advantage of that too much, you know. And I wish Dave was still around, you know. He was a great guy. But those are the kind of guys, I mean, you don't hear about, you know, that are great hunters. But
yeah, it's pretty rare. That's a great point on Dave. And I bring up a friend of mine, and guy I met is a Montana native, and I knew him before I lived here. I went on my first elk hunt with him, and I didn't know it at the time, but he had never shot a bull. He'd shot a cow before, but never shot a bull. And we got on a bull one evening, and ended up where I got to full draw on it. And this is a fun story. So I get to full draw, and we're 30 yards away from it. I'm aiming, I'm getting ready to shoot. And he's like, don't shoot. And I look at him, I'm like, why? He's like, it's on the wrong side of the fence. So we were close to a boundary, and I didn't even see there was a fence. I'm being honest, I was all fired up, right? There's a 6-point bull at 30 yards. I wasn't looking for barbed wire. And when he said that, I looked, and oh yeah, it's on the fence. It's on the wrong side. So I let down. And two morals of the story there with this guy, his name's Brandon, was one, no one, we were out in the middle of nowhere. No one would have known. No one, you know, I'm sure we could have got away with it. But Brandon is a real ethical guy, which I definitely appreciate. And I didn't know at the time that he had never shot a bull, and he was going to let me, you know, shoot first, basically the whole trip. So that's just some qualities, you know, I don't know. You don't see those qualities too much. And when you do see that selflessness in a hunter, it's inspiring. So kind of like Dave with Brandon, good example of that.
yeah.
George Hamrick says, Dan, have you had any trips or states you wish you had another go at and plan to?
Nebraska was really good to me. Not that I killed anything, but I learned a lot. So I think I could go back there and I could do fairly well. Indiana, I've started learning enough there that I could be dangerous. Those two places in particular are probably the best two places I think I could go and just get onto something really easy. I mean, obviously Iowa, I could go down there and kill something really easy. You know,
Sure.
The spots where I was, man, was at a nice area where I hunted this last year. But that's every 5-year tag or every 6-year.
Sure.
But Nebraska and Indiana are over the counter. I could do that. One of my problems, though, if you want to call it a problem, for me, it's not a problem, but for people who think that I have to succeed every year, it is I like tackling new things. I like learning things. You only live for a short period on this earth, you know, and the older you get, the more you realize how short that time period is.
Amen.
You know, I'm 57, you know, You on 50 at a 57, what have I had? 40 some years of hunting. That's only 40 some seasons, right? I mean, you only have so many seasons in you. And I really want to see things. I want to travel around. I want to experience things. I want to try different areas. I've never hunted Florida. I've never hunted Georgia. I haven't hunted Sitka deer out east. I haven't hunted in Maine. There's a lot of places I want to just experience. And it's really, to me, it is no longer about killing the biggest buck in the world. It's about the experience and about going and trying to get a great representative of an area. And I like the tough areas. But for most people, and I think most people watching the show right now, especially the younger people, they're at a point in their life where they want to succeed and they want to show everybody who they are, and they want to put a mark on this world with racks on their walls. I've done that. But if you go to those same spots over and over again, like if I go back to the places I've been, that's when you start killing stuff. So these guys you watch on YouTube that kill stuff every year, they're going back to those same areas. They learn them. They learn the bedding areas. They learn the trails. They learn the, accesses. They learn the special spots. And then they go back year after year after year. And every year they learn a little more. They kill a little better. And they get really good at killing deer in those areas. So they can go from state to state to state. Some of those guys can kill 5-6 deer in a year just by traveling that routine of those places in those time frames. Where, to me, that takes something out of it, because I want to go try new areas. I want to go experience new things, and learn more about different habitats and different places that deer live. So, but with that said, I'll probably end up going back to Nebraska and Indiana a couple times. Hopefully this year. I don't know.
But yeah, there's something about scratching the itch, and especially if you were close and didn't get it done, it makes you want to go back. I feel like there's some unfinished business there, but I'm with you. I don't know, I think 6 or 7 different states have killed deer in now. And I've talked about it on my own podcast before. That's the big thing for me, is I just like to adventure. I hunt different spots in Montana pretty regularly.
Yeah.
I just like to travel around, see new stuff and challenge and find out what I can find out. I've hunted a few spots that are so bad I'll never go back. but other than that, yeah, I like to travel around too.
Those are the kind I like going back to, the ones that are so bad you couldn't possibly kill a deer.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but
well, if that's the case, Dan, we should get some North Dakota tags this year, because that one for me has been that's been a tough nut to crack. Let's do 1 or 2 more here. Wisconsin bow hunter says, is there a date in late spring or summer that we should stop scouting bedding to avoid ruining the area for hunting a mature buck?
I wouldn't give it a date, but I probably would stop end of June, early July, when it starts getting so thick you can't even really find beddings. Sometime in June, when the grass gets really high, it'll go through those beds, because like I said, we're looking at fall beds, right?
Yeah.
And you won't be able to see the sign no more. When it gets that green, it's pretty much done. I know last year I scouted pretty late, and I think I got past turkey season, which I normally don't. But in the swamps, there's some areas where you could still see the beds fairly well. And I went into June last year, I believe. But
yeah, and I guess that's specific to bedding, right? I don't think you ever stop scouting.
Yeah,
you stop scouting.
I will say that I will scout even bedding right up till season. If you ruin it, what's the worst thing? I mean, if I'm not going to hunt it, I will not scout something I already have a plan on hunting. Even if I don't have all my intel and I'm taking a guess, kind of, at least a guess is better than kicking all the deer out of there just before you're going to hunt.
Right.
But I will scout something, and maybe in August or something, then go in there and look and see what the sign looks like, and if it's good, okay, well, maybe I'll come back, October, end of September, or maybe maybe even right away and give it a shot, but maybe not exactly where I walk. But I mean, I'm scouting all the time. It's just a matter of you don't want to really, you kick deer out of bedding areas and you're defeating yourself. I mean, that's the biggest, probably the number one reason most people don't succeed is your average guy will go out, a week or two before season, scout like crazy, find some spots, set up tree stands, cut shooting lanes, and then go out there opening day and expect to kill a deer. So, I mean, don't become that guy, but don't be afraid to go look at the bedding. I think your main frame time to look is from when you stop deer hunting. As soon as you're done with your deer hunting, you tag out or the season ends, whichever comes first. From that time period till right about the time you get green up is the number one best time to scout, best time to figure out those deer.
Yeah, and it's I think, Dan, you made a great point about being afraid, and I feel like it's always a risk management thing, because every time you go in there, you're risking blowing it out. But it's just like trying to set up on a buck or a buck budding area. You've got to push close enough to shoot the deer, but not so close that you spook it. I mean, that's risk management too. And at the end of the day, when you're out there, you got to use your brain, right?
Yeah. Every time you go into a bedding area, you do damage. Every time. So when I go in, I don't want to come back another time. I don't want to come back and set up stands at a different time. I go in with a plan. I learn what I need to learn. I find the trees I need to find. I figure out what winds, everything I need to know, I find in the day I'm in there, and then I do not come back till kill time. Period.
Great advice. Well, last one here for tonight. Keith Nolte says, I often see you get soaking wet. What kind of clothes do you wear?
Sometimes I have underwear on. But no, I wear. I usually when I'm in swamps, I wear rubber boots. I've been wearing gum leaf. Now I believe they're switching to a new brand because gum leaf boots are not going to be made no more. But I wear rubber boots when I'm in the swamps. I wear the Lathrop and Sons hiking boots when I'm on dry land. I usually wear work pants that you get from I don't remember the brands, but I buy them at Menards. They got these really thick, heavy denimish pants that are like brown or olive drab, real dark colors. They got real big cargo pockets on the sides, and I fit all my gear in them and stuff. And I don't wear anything special. I try not to look like a hunter, which is why I kind of like those just like brown or green pants. I wear plaids, which is kind of why Lou made that plaid jacket. He kind of likes that. But I just kind of wear what blends in, and I get wet. If I get soaked, I get soaked. You empty your boot out when you're done. It's the old. It's probably one of the most widely known beast symbols. I mean, we should do a shirt on that with a black image of a person pouring his boot out.
Yeah.
A t-shirt, because we're all doing that if we're going to them swamps. I mean, I just get soaked and I deal with it, basically.
Yeah. And what about like mid to late season when it's going to be cold? Do you ever take anything, waders, hip boots, or anything? Or I'm imagine when it's mid-November, you're not walking through chest deep water with just denim on.
Yeah, I usually don't really go through chest deep water that often. I usually find some way through it. If it's that deep, I'll usually use a canoe or something. But I can usually get to just about all my spots in rubber boots, where occasionally, even in the late season, you put a little water over your boot, but it won't kill you. You just shiver a little,
Yeah. All right, Dan, I think that's the majority of the questions we had today. If we missed your question, apologize. We take questions almost every show, so if we miss it, jump on next week, and we'll try to get it next week. And Dan, I think we won't mention too much, but I think you're working on potentially an exciting guest for a future show. So if you plan to tune in next week or maybe the week after, should have a good show coming up.
Yeah, I'll probably get him on for next week, I think. Yeah, try anyways.
That'd be good. I think that's somebody everybody would be excited to see on. So Dan, turn it over to you if you got anything to say before we jump off for today.
No, just get out there, get scouting, and keep it fun.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll be back here next Tuesday, 7 p.m. Central. Thanks everyone. Catch you then.